if you are working harder than the person that is living with an addiction is working on it, you're lost, completely lost. It'll never work. That person has to work as hard or harder than you are to try to make them better.
Hello and welcome to the I Love Me Lab show. My name is Gail Buck, and I'm an NLP Master Life Coach, meditation instructor, and a seeker of happiness. And each week, we're going to bring you an inspiring person or message to help you discover additional ways of self-care, self-love, and becoming a healthier, happier you. So thanks for spending time with us today, and let's let the show begin. I want to welcome anybody and everybody who's joining us. Welcome to the I Love Me Lab podcast. I'm super excited again today to be with another youthful, young, old friend, a friend that I haven't seen since, 2007, I think, was the last time I saw you. It's when we kind of went different ways in a company. And Neil is a realtor, a father, a husband, outdoorsman, a fantastic person that resides in Phoenix in the Phoenix, Arizona area. And we've got a lot to talk about today.
We have so much to talk about. How many hours do you have?
That's right. That's right. So recently we reconnected because one of the things on occasion on this podcast, we talk about addiction, or the listeners that come back frequently know that I have a son that has a drug addiction, and some of the journey that I've gone through in this space. And I reached out to you recently because back when we knew each other originally, I didn't have that in my world, nor did I know that it was coming, but you did. And at that time, it was so far away from my way of seeing things and thinking that that could ever happen to me. I remember I listened and thinking, "Oh my gosh, that's so terrible. That's so sad." And then letting it go because I was so far removed. And you and I took different paths in that journey. And I want you to, if you would just kind of share your story, and, it includes, adopting your grandson and the whole shebang, if you would.
Yeah, I mean, how far back do you want me to go? I mean, do you want me to go back to like where I was born and all that, or where do you want me to start in
No,
the
so you're
spectrum
married.
of my
Yeah.
life?
Yeah, you're married to this, this wonderful lady, and she has a couple of kids. And when the kids start getting into trouble, I mean, when I first knew of this, you were adopting your grandson. So why don't we start from there?
Yeah, okay. So, I was in the Navy, got out of the Navy, um, married my wife, Emily. I met her just before my last cruise, and I was only in for 4 years. So at the time, I was 23, 22 or 23. And she was a single mom with two kids, and we started dating. And I knew instantly that she was probably the one for me, probably within, oh, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes probably of meeting her. So, yeah, and she's a little older than me. So that was a little bit of a thing for her, but not really for me. And she had two kids. She'd been married twice before, which, at the time I was young. I mean, there was no red flags to me. I was in love. And so we got married, and then that was up in Washington State where I was home ported. And then I brought the family down here to Arizona. She had Christopher, our son, who was 7 years old at the time, and our daughter, Carrie, who was 3 at the time. And so we moved down here to Arizona and, bought our first house, and just kind of worked. I was working 3 jobs at the time. She was working 2 jobs at the time. And we were doing everything we could to give the kids a great home and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And then when did things change for you? So when did
Well, yeah, no, that's a good question. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump in there. So when did things change? So by that, kind of like the reality of being a stepfather and all that kind of started kicking in right away because I realized at the time that Emily and I had come from completely different backgrounds. and completely different experiences, and I knew that. That started coming in. Like, for instance, just an example, my family's super close and we're all huggy kissy, all that kind of stuff. Her family is the polar opposite of that. So I think the first indication was when Emily was interacting with my family and the children were interacting, and my family was very welcoming to them, and it came off as phony to Emily because of her background. You know what I mean? And so it was kind of weird. So yeah, there was a little friction, all that kind of stuff there. And then we were raising the kids, and we had different ideas of how to raise kids. And because I wasn't the bio father, when I would voice my opinion about something or whatever, it would get shot down pretty quick. So I realized that I had responsibility, but not necessarily control over everything. So there was some friction there, and I think probably, I wish at the time that we could have been more on the same page when it came to raising the kids. So that might have been part of the issue. Of course, you always blame yourself when your kids have problems, but we started seeing right around the time the kids were turning, 13-ish, kind of that age is when they developed their own personalities and kind of started doing their own thing. Our daughter, Carrie, um, really started, I mean, she was great up until eighth grade, straight A's and all that kind of stuff. As soon as she went into high school, everything changed almost overnight as far as attitude and just all that kind of stuff. And so it caused a lot of friction within the household. Um,
I just want to interrupt just really quick, because whether it's in the situation where one is a biological parent or isn't, or they're both biological people, I think that because we were doing a lot of reflecting, being in our age space and reflecting back to when we were younger and all the things that you learn along the way, and either, we're still standing strong or you're laying flat, right? Because there's a lot of lessons along the way. And one of the real important lessons, I think, where my husband and I could have done much better is also together always have been a unified front, which we weren't, because I had a way of
right.
thinking that you parent and he had a different way of thinking. And so it causes conflict. And so what do the kids see is that there's, you go to one for one, you go to the other for other, and there's not really this unity. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I think that's really important for anybody who's a young parent. You've got to be on the same page. And that means setting aside time to, in fact, not just thinking about it, making time to make sure that you're having your private conversations and that you're a unified front for the sake of the family and the sake of the children.
No, I agree 100%. And I know it sounds cliche, but they never wrote a book on parenting.
Mhm.
And even, well, I mean, I guess they have, but even if they did, it would be, every situation is so different. But the important and the main thing is that I think parents need to be on the same page. And if they're not on the same page, don't let the kids know. I mean, that's kind of how my parents were. I never saw my parents argue, and I know they disagreed now in later years. I talked with my mother, and oh yeah, they disagreed on a whole host of things, but we never knew that. So, so anyway, so moving forward, our daughter Carrie started having issues, and then boyfriends and all this kind of stuff, and not learning, not listening to rules and things of that nature. And there was a lot of uh, drama associated with that. And then one day, unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, because now in retrospect, it was a blessing in disguise, but she got pregnant and she was young at the time. She was 17 and the bio dad was 15.
Mhm.
And so uh, we had Angel. That's where Angel came from. That's our grandson, Angel. So anyway, so Carrie, was we tried to help Carrie by getting her out on her own. We bought a house to put them in. We were lucky enough at that point in our lives to have enough money to be able to do something like that. So we thought that by supporting her financially, she could, uh, go to school and be able to, within 4 years or so, launch herself and be independent and all that kind of stuff. So that was the plan.
That was the plan.
That was the plan, but it didn't work. So,
Right, and also
uh,
everybody's different, right? So maybe, in parenting, providing everything for your child is what's gonna be the best thing, right? But it's just different scenarios, that we'll get
yeah.
to in a minute. I talk to a lot of parents that, have or had challenges with their kids, and it's always easy to throw money at things, throw money and get them a house, throw money and get them rehab, throw money and get them this and get them that, hoping that money will fix it, and oftentimes that's not the case, right? So
Oh no, yeah, it's the furthest thing from the truth, unfortunately. Yeah, because I've tried that time and time again. You'd think I'd learn after a while. I'm a slow learner, okay? But but yeah, so that that really didn't work out. And in the long, just to make a long story short, after a certain amount of time went by, probably 12 to 18 months, um, the boyfriend was in and out of the home, and there was all kinds of fighting, and the police were called a lot because the neighbors of the home would call us and say, hey, this is going on. And Angel was in this horrible environment, and we found out, pretty soon, we get, there was no, like he'd be up at 3 in the morning because they were fighting and arguing. And so this is a baby that's supposed to be sleeping and
yeah.
being able to have a normal life. So by the time we let that go on for, well, it went on a little bit longer, I would say about probably almost 24 months, about 2 years, is when we finally came to the realization that we had to do something because this wasn't working. And honestly, our main concern was Angel. We cared about our daughter, but at this point, she was 19 and she knew right from wrong, and she had been given as much support as possible, but she wasn't really, doing the right things for herself. So we wound up on, I remember it well because it was Halloween. We had Angel come stay with us for Halloween so he could trick or treat in our neighborhood. And we would have him come and spend the night and all that just so he could see what a normal household was like,
Mhm.
you know? And it was very painful, by the way. All of this is just extremely painful. Uh, but then he came to stay with us, and we wound up keeping him forever.
Yeah.
So he never went back. And it actually turned out okay. And, at this point in our marriage, Emily would actually start accepting some of my strategies when dealing with the children. So at this time, Emily started accepting some of my strategies. I think she saw that some of my strategies worked, and rather than get into a big fight about what a horrible mother Carrie is and how the child is not being raised properly and all that, it was, hey, we understand that you have a lot of pressure on you talking to our daughter Carrie. We For you, we think it's better, for you to go and do your thing, and we'll take care of Angel and just let him stay here as long as he wants, and blah 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 blah. So we did kind of a step approach because what was causing so much anxiety in our lives now was what's going to happen with Angel. So my goal was to try and come up with a game plan for that to get us from point A to point B to where we could have the control. Because I think, in my opinion, anxiety that we all experience, I think the genesis of all of it is not being in control of of whatever it is. It could be whatever. It could be your health. It could be your marriage. It could be your work. It could be anything that causes anxiety. It's usually because you don't have control over it. So I guess in a sense, I was trying to relieve our anxiety by bringing Angel in, even though it was, a lot of people at the time said, "Oh my God, you guys just got your kids out." I mean, I have friends telling me, "Why would you want to take on a baby?"
Yeah, so I was gonna ask you, back to the control thing, and at the bottom of not having control is fear, right? So we're either motivated by fear or we're motivated by love, and I'm guessing that there was all this fear about, what's gonna happen to him and what should we be doing? And I was gonna ask you, about what age were you when you and your wife, when you became, parents again, basically by adopting your grandchild?
We were probably, I would say, around. Um, this has probably got to be. I was probably. I was in my 30s,
Mhm.
I think, at this point.
So you were still pretty
No, I
young,
had to be
really.
younger than that. I think I had to be younger than that because
With
Angel.
Angel? No. Really?
Well, let me just think here, because Angel was 3. Yeah, you're right. So I was probably in my 30s. I
Oh,
had
so
to be
that's
in
still
my
pretty
30s,
young,
early
really. I
30s.
mean,
Oh yeah.
nowadays, people are having kids in their 30s, yeah?
Yes, yeah, no, that was the weird thing because, well, Emily's 10 years older than I am. So we already had this kind of thing going. So I've always been kind of a young husband and young grandfather and all that. So that always was kind of funny because people always thought Angel was my son and not my grandson.
Well, sure. Which he
Yeah,
was.
yeah, he really was.
Yeah,
So, but it was actually a positive. So he came and lived with us, moved in. We had a beautiful room for him and all this kind of stuff. Emily was still working at the time, and I was doing real estate, 100% commission, but we got all of our medical and stuff through her. But when he came to live with us, we really felt that it was important that he had somebody with him all the time. So Emily quit her job. And so we gave up everything. And I mean, we were on like a tightrope with no net
yeah.
as far as medical and pretty much everything. Because, 100% commission real estate, uh, yeah, there's no net there. But we felt that it was super important to really get Angel off and turn things around. He was having some emotional problems and some delay speech issues and things like that. We just didn't want to put him in a daycare because we kind of started that, and then when we would drop him off, he would just go crazy, like a lot of kids do. But it was a little different. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So I know I'm just kind of going on and on here. Am I just?
Well, no, it's like it's just really interesting because I wanted to circle back to your work. So you had this going on, and you also had some, I believe your son, experienced some addiction issues?
Yes. Right about this time is when we realized our older son, Christopher, started having issues with work and not having money and just kind of, things that weren't adding up. I would say things weren't adding up.
Mm,
And we couldn't put our finger quite on what was happening with him. And, we would become frustrated because he was he was working jobs where he'd work the job for maybe 2 or 3 months, and then he'd move on to another job.
mhm.
And it seemed like the jobs got worse, and it was always somebody else's fault. There was never any acceptance of responsibility and all that. But he's older and on his own, and he had gotten married, and they had a couple of kids, and they were kind of doing their thing. We would help them financially here and there, but it was just kind of an odd thing. So yeah, so we had Angel on one end, and then we kind of had this other stuff kind of floating out there that we weren't quite sure what was happening.
And the reason that I'm asking is because when, the addiction came into my life, via my son, and at first I thought easy solution, send him to rehab. We hadn't had any of that in our life at all. So I wasn't familiar. And I just thought, oh, my goodness, okay, let's find a nice expensive rehab and send them in 30 days and we'll be done. I didn't know that this could be like a lifelong journey, right? And I took a different path than yours. I mean, I had a very successful business at the time. I pretty much closed it up and ran. I went into the fetal position. I didn't know what to do. I felt like dying a lot. I mean, I kept throwing money at different, possible solutions. And so my finances went down the drain. My relationships went down the drain. And I see you took a different approach. I mean, I'm sure you had the ups and downs in your personal relationship with your wife. These are a
Oh
lot of
yeah.
stressors, but you're together. You're together. You made it through. Your business prospered, right? Or maybe not.
Hey,
I'm looking at your face and it's maybe not.
if
I
I
don't
would
know.
have killed her, if I would have killed her 20 years ago, I'd be out on probation right now. No, I'm kidding. Yeah. Oh, yeah. No. Oh, it went through some major up and downs, but that's probably for another podcast. But
Yeah, well,
it,
but I guess it's like because you guys, yes, and for another time, but you guys managed to weather that
the
cycle,
storm.
the storm, the big storm. And you mentioned earlier that it was a very painful period, and I want to touch on that a little bit because I think anybody who's listening that's in this space is nodding their head right now, yes, because they get it. If you're not in this space, it's kind of like me when I first knew you were having, yeah, it's like, oh, that's too bad, but it's so far over here, I can't even imagine, right? And so I wanted to speak a little bit to that because there's a lot of shame attached to these kinds of things. There's guilt as a parent. I mean, what I could have done differently. There's, judgment that you get from other people, but also I think that we put upon ourselves. And so I'm curious as to how you navigated those kinds of spaces.
Yeah. It's interesting that you'd mentioned the path you took with your son and how your life just kind of got crushed. Yeah, nose
Yeah.
dived,
Yeah.
nose dived into the ground.
Yeah. Into the abyss.
That's what Emily did. That's
Yeah.
100% what Emily did. And so I was trying to, kind of keep everything going.
Yeah.
And it was really tough to, because, in real estate, um, you really have to be focused
Hmm.
and you got to be up and you got to be positive. So I was living these two separate lives. I had my work life where I could control things, not in a bad way, but control things in a good way. I
Hmm.
could give advice that I knew people would generally take because the advice was good, honest, solid advice.
Hmm.
And I would move people through these times in their lives. Buying a house is one of the most stressful, biggest decision you're going to make. So, in a sense, the stuff that was happening in my private life and how I had to go through that was great training, actually,
Yeah.
for my real estate career. But it was so much easier in real estate. Then I'd go home at night and, I would give it the same kind of advice that people were really open to during the day and would get the opposite effect at night. So that was pretty painful. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, because my guess is that you'd go home and it's like, you know, well, you're both in suffering, but you're suffering in a different way.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I would have the answer. Do you know what I mean? I would see a clear answer. I would say, okay, this is the path. And so I'd go, this is what we need to do. And that would cause a lot of pain with her because I just think she didn't really feel that, well, it's not that easy. And maybe, what I was doing was trying to, and this is what caused probably a lot of the friction, was I was trying to be empathetic and everything else. But at the same time, I was like, hey, we have a game plan we have to execute here if we're going to get this done, and we need to be on the same page. And maybe, the empathy wasn't enough. Maybe I wasn't showing enough empathy. I thought I did, but in retrospect, maybe I was being too like, hey, this is really what we need to do. I see this clearly.
What did you
Where she
see
was
clearly?
still in,
What
huh?
was your game plan?
My game plan, okay, so to roll back a little bit, we started seeing weird things happen with our son. And I knew that something was happening. She knew something was happening. We were kind of talking about all this, but we didn't really find out until he was arrested the first time. And he was arrested. He was at a rental house that they were selling drugs out of and doing all this. So basically, for all of your viewers, my son Chris, he was at the time. Now he was probably in his late 20s, early 30s. I was probably in my 40s at this point, and he was busted in this rental house with a bunch of people in there. And apparently, they had found all kinds of drugs and all this kind of stuff. But because there were so many people there, they couldn't really pin it on any particular person. There was a stolen car that was in the garage, and there was a video of Chris and somebody else. Somehow, I think it was, there was a video on, there was a camera on the house out
Mm,
front, and it somehow it got on a video where it showed Chris driving this car in, and the police got that. And so that's kind of how everything started. So Emily went over to this house because Chris was arrested and she was going to go get his stuff. And the house was a complete disaster inside. I mean, like you could tell that insane people had been living in there. It was
yeah,
filthy, dirty. All the stuff you see, lots of like 15 printers, stuff like that, where they're stealing printers and then printing. Who knows what they were doing, but it was obviously not good. And Emily was in denial. At first, she was like, oh, he just got in with a bunch of bad people and it's not really him and all this kind of stuff. And, we went through a series of things over the years, and he spiraled down into where he disappeared for a while. And again, painful for Emily and me too. uh, and then he resurfaced because he was in the hospital at this point. What had happened was he had OD'd on fentanyl and heroin.
mm,
And so he wound up, they had to basically, he OD'd, I mean, probably was dead. And they shot one of those pins into him, bring him back to life, went to the hospital and then to jail. Um, and went to jail for about 3 months or 4 months on a drug charge, got out, and then, of course, we threw money at it again.
yeah.
Told you I'm a slow learner.
Well, I think as parents, we just keep hoping. Just this time, this time.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what we did here was bought an apartment and put him in the apartment, and thought that, again, just like we did with our daughter, we thought, well, you know what, we'll give him, he obviously went through some problems. He's a good person, and he'll see the light. He will see the light, after, he'll want to be like us, and live a normal life and all this kind of stuff,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So we put him in the place. We thought, once he clears his head and all this, he's going to see how horrible that was. He'll never want to go back to that again. So he immediately went back to that again and used the apartment as a platform to steal, do drugs, and do all this kind of stuff. And we'd go to the apartment, and there was other families that were in there. We're talking, you know, families that are hardworking people with children that don't make a lot of money because they're working 4 freaking jobs
yeah.
to pay their rent, and then they have to have a guy like my son living next door to them,
That makes
drugs
them
and stuff.
uncomfortable.
Yeah, why should they have to live their life like that? So I started, and then, but again, there was that deal where there was kind of this red line between Emily and I, as far as what should we do. And she's finally come around after all these years. So, I said,
I just wanted to back up to that spot as well because I have certainly felt that more than one time, and so I'm sure many of the listeners have as well when you know that what you said about your son, that none of the neighbors would want to be, you know, near that person because it makes them uncomfortable. It actually scares them. And
They're a
I've been in that
menace.
situation with my son. And when you actually acknowledge and face that your child is the scary one or the one that makes people uneasy or something like that, that's a hard thing to bear. And then there's all that, you know, not knowing what to do with that or not knowing how to contribute to make that better, which for me personally has made me a much more compassionate person for other people in difficult situations. I think that that was probably the biggest gift, that this experience has given me, is that it's opened my mind and my heart to others because it's a tough one, you know?
It is a tough one, and yeah, I mean, I'm seeing these little kids playing out in in the playground area and all that near the apartment, and there's thieves going in and out and drugs and all this kind of stuff and
Yeah.
everything. I mean, I knew at this point that's what was happening because as soon as he installed a camera outside his door at the apartment complex so he could see who was coming to the door, that's a good indication that there's something bad going on inside that property.
Mhm.
So we wound up, and what the real, where it really came to a head was when the neighbors called me because I kind of wanted to keep a tab on it. I felt bad for the neighbors. Here's Dennis the Menace living next door to them, and he was a menace to the neighborhood. Well, young girls started going in and out of that
Mm.
place, like underaged girls. And so that was it right there. As soon as I heard that, I told Emily that, we are now as owners of that property. This is what I used. I go, we as owners of the property, and it's absolutely the truth,
Yeah.
have a legal obligation if we know there's something going on inside that apartment to evict that person
Yeah.
because otherwise it could come down on us. And I wasn't at this point after all the help we did. I mean, it really came down to personal survival. And I know this is probably the stuff where I don't sound empathetic, but I wasn't going to get my life crushed at this point, financially or legally or
Mhm.
anything else. Plus, it was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So we had to have him evicted because he wouldn't leave. We asked him nicely to leave. We said, "Look, you can't stay here anymore." I can't even imagine how painful this must have been for Emily. It was a lot easier for me, I guess, because I mean, I looked at it at this point as my own survival and that I had done a lot of sacrificing. And now it was time to actually protect myself and not be like in la la land thinking, oh, everything's going to get better.
So, I
So
just wanted to add a little
yeah,
bit to that because I do understand completely because I've been in the same circumstance, and for me, my son is in and out of, mostly in now, homelessness, and he uses hospitals like hotels, and inevitably
right.
I'll get the social worker that calls me because he won't give them any information. He'll give them my number. And I used to talk with them like and cry and beg and for support, and but it's never, and they don't do anything. It's just gathering this information. And now they'll say, "Well, are you going to come and pick them up?" And I'll say, "No, I've done that before, and I've called 911 because I feared for my own safety. And no,
Yeah,
I won't pay for that anymore because there's no more money left." And it, it just gets to be this point of physical and personal survival and financial survival, and I think again, if you're not in this space, you don't understand how critical and deep. It's almost like living in the belly of the beast. You are, and so for your own survival, you have to love and let go. That doesn't mean you stop loving, but love and let go, right?
yeah. It's a tough pill to swallow
Yeah.
when you sacrifice the best years of your life
Mhm.
for another person, and then they go the wrong direction. We're talking about our sons. And then it's like this reversal where you actually have to protect yourself from them.
Yeah.
Even though you've been protecting them all these lives, now all of a sudden it's like this person that you've protected all of your life and done everything you can for. Now you have to protect yourself from that person because they're a predator at this point. The drugs turn them into a predator. And I know that's kind of a strong term, and maybe it's not the right term, but you know, it's I feel for people that have addiction issues.
Mhm.
I really do. But at the same time, I have to realize that I have to protect myself also from that. I can't just try and fix all the time because I, and here's a good rule of thumb for your listeners out there that have anybody in their family that is dealing with addiction. If you are working harder than the person that is living with an addiction is working on it, you're lost, completely lost. It'll never work. That person has to work as hard or harder than you are to try to make them better. And it took me decades to learn that, unfortunately. But if you're working harder than they are, you're lost, man. It's not, I mean, you really got to make them work hard. And they say they got to fall to the bottom. Well, Chris did fall to the bottom, and it took a long time. But the best thing that happened to him, and we'll see, there's still a final chapter to be written, or not a final chapter, but there's another chapter to be written on Christopher and his addiction. So he's currently incarcerated in Yuma. He'll be there for another 11 months. So he did a 2-year stint because of previous things that he had did with drugs and weapons and all that kind of stuff, and then didn't go to court and all this kind of stuff. Well, finally got picked up because he started doing drugs again. And actually, let me back up a little bit. He got picked up because he was actually starting to do good because rather than help him this last time he kind of resurfaced, Emily and I came to the agreement that he was not going to live with us. We weren't going to support him. He'd have to go to a sober house and do it on his own. And so he went to a sober house, and the sober house got him lined up with St. Mary's Food Bank, and St. Mary's Food Bank put him through a culinary school where he learned how to cook, and he got his card for server card, cook card, did all this kind of stuff, and he was totally doing great. But he still had this 2-year sentence hanging over his head. So it's kind of ironic that the time that he really started doing really great, he still had this sentence over his head, and he wound up having to, he went to court. The judge was sympathetic. The prosecutor wanted him to do 2 years, even though I guess the probation department or whatever recommended that he doesn't get incarcerated, because he was in school and doing this, and now he was working at St. Mary's making meals for the Meals for Wheels and for the kids' school lunches and things like that. They got a big kitchen there. So he was on the right track, but you know what? He had to pay the piper. So that's where he's at right now. We're hoping that when he gets out, he'll go back to the sober living place and go right back to work again. But you never know.
You never know. That's true.
You never will know.
So
you just got to learn. You got to learn to roll with the punches,
yeah, and I don't know, I just admire you honestly so much that you were able to, and yes, I know there are lots of ups and downs, but that you and Emily were able to stick it out together, and your business continued to flourish, which is really great. Which, by the way, Neil is a fantastic real estate professional in the Phoenix, Arizona area. So if anybody, is looking for anything there and wants to reach out to him, we're going to put his contact information in the show notes.
Yeah.
He's also a fantastic coach in this space. If you want a male's perspective and want to reach out to Neil, we'll put his contact information for you to do that as well. And Neil, I have a final question on the I Love Me Lab. one last piece of wisdom that you can give. I mean, we kind of talked about different things. We talked mostly about our kids and addiction and those kind of things, but also in like the lessons that you learn growing older. Like if you could take your however old you are, old you are self and go back to that 20-year-old man, that 30-year-old man, what have you learned that you could tell him now?
That's a really interesting question. And I thought about this a lot as I'm getting older. Uh, you kind of look back on your life. I would say that the best piece of advice I could give my young self would be, Neil, you're not going to be for everybody. So, not everybody's going to like you. And no matter what you do, you're not going to be for everybody, but you'll be for somebody. So, I guess that would be my advice, is to not worry about what people really think about you. Be honest to people, be yourself, be authentic, be who you are. And there's going to be people that won't like you for that. And that's fine. So I think that's it right there. Just be authentic and true to myself.
Well, I love that actually, and I personally like you a lot, and I can't imagine that anybody wouldn't, but, I don't know. So,
Oh no, I got a client right now that hates me. They hung up on me today.
I don't believe it. I don't believe it.
They didn't like my advice, but that's okay. What are you going to say?
Well,
But see,
thank you
it
so
doesn't
much.
bother me now. That might have bothered me. But anyways, I know you're trying to close it up, so I'm sorry. I
No,
don't
and
want
you know what?
to.
That actually happens the same to me, and I think that has to do with just kind of, I don't know, you just kind of massage that part of you where also, when that happens on the rare occasion that somebody doesn't like me, it's like, "Huh, oh well." You just
Yeah,
kinda go on because we all
we're
have our
not for
stories.
everybody.
Yeah, and we
Yeah,
all have our stories that we tell ourselves, and based on our
yeah,
stories, it's my perception of you or of me or of anybody else, right? So just kind of letting go of
yeah,
those kind of things, like, who cares, right?
yeah. That's exactly what I think. Well, this was a lot of fun. So I would love to do this again. And if there's anybody out there that's going through the kind of pain that I've been through, that you've been through, it's one of those isolating kind of things too,
Yeah.
because of the shame of blaming yourself for what your child is doing and all that kind of stuff. And I could talk till I'm blue in the face, but I always will have that shame down there a little bit. It diminishes over the years, but you'll always have it. You just got to learn to live with it. But if we can help anybody out there, if I can help anybody out there, Gail, line them up, man. I'll be happy to talk to anybody about what I've gone through. And if it helps them in some little way, then hey, it was worth it.
Yeah, thank you, thank you, and anybody listening, please reach out because I'd like to, um, form a sort of group, where we can support each other and, have people like Neil, and we've had, the people from Shatterproof, on, and Michael Speakman, and other great people in different areas and different perspectives about addiction and situations and illnesses like addiction. And so, Neil, thank you very much. And to all you listeners, thanks for joining again. I hope to see you next week. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and we will see you later. Thank you. Thanks so much for listening to this conversation. If you enjoyed it and want more information on our guests and resources, please visit ilovemelab.com. And please, if you enjoyed this episode, remember to subscribe and share with a friend. Hey, there's more great episodes to come. So until next time.